I said today the two stories in the NFL at quarterback that are fascinating are what is J.J. McCarthy and who will win the Browns starting job. Because so tomorrow, or the time this airs, it's mandatory minicamp. This is not voluntary OTA, so veterans can show up. And my argument is this owner, Jimmy Haslam, drafted Johnny Manziel and Baker Mayfield and signed Deshaun Watson to organize.
What if I told you that a desperate NFL owner is about to make the most controversial quarterback decision of the decade? Jimmy Haslam is sitting in that Cleveland Browns war room right now, watching Joe Flacco struggle, and he's got his eyes locked on one name, Shedeur Sanders. The whispers are getting louder, the pressure is mounting, and by week 8, we might witness the most dramatic quarterback controversy since Johnny Manziel. This isn't just speculation anymore. This is about to get real. Let me paint you a picture that should terrify every Browns fan. Jimmy Haslam has a track record that reads like a quarterback graveyard. This is the same owner who signed Johnny Manziel. Remember that disaster? The same guy who drafted Baker Mayfield and then threw him under the bus. And let's not forget, the crown jewel of bad decisions, giving Deshaun Watson that absolutely egregious contract that's still haunting Cleveland today.
And my argument is this owner, Jimmy Haslam, drafted Johnny Manziel and Baker Mayfield and signed Deshaun Watson to an egregiously bad contract. He's desperate for a star at quarterback. He wants a star at quarterback. Well, Kenny Pickett's got no juice. Dylan Gabriel's 5'8". Joe Flacco's old. Shedeur is the only potential star. And if you look at the first 5 weeks, it's 5 top 10 offenses, then Aaron Rodgers in Pittsburgh.
But here's what Colin Cowherd is telling us, and this is where it gets scary for Browns fans. Haslam is desperate for a star at quarterback. Not just any quarterback, a star. And when you look at Cleveland's current options, it's honestly laughable. Kenny Pickett? The guy has zero juice, zero excitement. Dylan Gabriel? Come on, the kid's 5 feet 8 inches. Good luck throwing over NFL defensive lines. Joe Flacco. He's older than some of the coaches on that team. That leaves exactly one option with any real star power, Shedeur Sanders. And if you think Jimmy Haslam isn't salivating over the possibility of having Deion Sanders' son on his team, you haven't been paying attention to how this man operates. Now here's where this gets absolutely brutal. For Cleveland, the Browns' first 5 weeks, they're facing 5 top 10 offenses. We're talking about dynamic quarterbacks like Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Tua with Mike McDaniel's explosive system. These are offensive juggernauts that can put up 30-plus points without breaking a sweat.
It's got no juice. Dylan Gabriel's 5'8". Joe Flacco's old. Shedeur is the only potential star. And if you look at the first 5...
Picture this scenario. Joe Flacco walks into that opener, and he's facing one of these elite offenses. The crowd is already restless because they know they're watching a 38-year-old quarterback try to keep up with the modern NFL. The defense gets gassed because they're on the field for 40 minutes. The offense goes 3 and out repeatedly because Flacco's arm strength is shot, and he can't make the throws that these defenses are daring him to make. By week 3, if the Browns are sitting at 0-3 with Flacco throwing 3 interceptions in prime time, what do you think happens? The fans are going to be absolutely nuclear. The media pressure is going to be insane. And Jimmy Haslam? He's going to be pacing around that facility like a caged animal, demanding answers. This is exactly what Colin Cowherd is predicting, and honestly, it makes perfect sense. If this team looks dull and lifeless in those first 6 weeks, which they probably will with that roster, they're looking at a 4-6 win season. And that's when desperate owners make desperate moves. But wait, it gets even more interesting. Let's talk about Dylan Gabriel for a second, because this draft pick tells us everything we need to know about what's really happening in Cleveland.
Stfansky and Barry, who are very highly thought of. And I was actually in the car today. I was listening to your show when you gave me a little shout out talking about how it was clear during the draft, right? They overdrafted Gabriel to keep the owner off their back, and then the kid kept falling, and then he made him draft him.
Yeah, you came up with that. I didn't. I think it's true because I asked GMs about Dylan Gabriel, and they're like, he's not a 3rd-round draft pick.
I knew people that thought the guy was undraftable because of his size. not that he's not. I mean, he was an excellent college player, and very productive, but...
Multiple GMs around the league looked at Dylan Gabriel going in the 3rd round and said, what the hell just happened? Some teams had this kid marked as completely undraftable because of his size. He's an excellent college player, sure, but a third-round pick? That was jarring for everyone. Here's the tea. They drafted Gabriel to keep Jimmy Haslam off their back. The owner was hovering over them during the draft, literally hovering, and they could see where this was going. They knew Haslam wanted his quarterback, so they threw him a bone with Gabriel, hoping it would satisfy his need to meddle. But here's the kicker. Shedeur Sanders was still there in the 5th round. The kid they really wanted, the actual star prospect, just sitting there waiting. And you know Jimmy Haslam was watching every single pick, probably getting more frustrated by the minute. This is classic Browns dysfunction. The front office trying to manage an owner who can't help himself, making compromises that please no one and help nothing. Now here's where this story takes a really dark turn for Cleveland. Kevin Stfansky is a respected offensive mind around the league. The guy has proven he can coach, he can develop players, and he knows what he's doing. But there's one problem. He's about to be put in an impossible position.
If they force him to start Shedeur Sanders and the coach doesn't want to play him, I do think Kevin Stfansky by the end of the year will just quit. It'll be one of those situations where Stfansky and Barry, who are very highly thought of.
If Jimmy Haslam forces Stfansky to start Shedeur Sanders when the coach doesn't want to play him, we could see something unprecedented. Colin Cowherd thinks Stfansky might literally quit by the end of the year. Just walk away from the whole mess. Think about that for a second. A respected NFL head coach quitting mid-season because his owner is forcing him to start a rookie who isn't ready. That's not just dysfunction, that's organizational suicide, and it's not just Stfansky. Andrew Barry, the GM, is highly thought of around the league too. These are smart football people who understand how to build a team. But when you've got an owner breathing down your neck, making personnel decisions based on star power instead of football readiness, what are you supposed to do? The locker room dynamics would be absolutely toxic. You've got veterans like Myles Garrett who are trying to win now, and you're asking them to rally around a rookie quarterback who got the job because the owner has a crush on his last name. Here's something a lot of people don't understand about the NFL. You can't just throw a guy out there because he looks good on paper. These veterans don't play around when it comes to practice and preparation. Remember when Brock Purdy became the starter in San Francisco? It wasn't just because Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance got hurt. It was because guys like Fred Warner and Nick Bosa were telling the coaches, "We love this guy in practice. We've been seeing him ball out on the scout team." That's how you earn respect in the NFL. You prove it against NFL caliber players in practice, day after day, week after week. You build that street cred with the team because they see you making plays when the lights aren't on. But if you're just handed the starting job because the owner wants his shiny new toy to play, that's when teams can quit on you. That's when veteran players start questioning everything about the organization. Shedeur Sanders might be talented, but has he earned that respect yet? Has he shown these Browns veterans that he can handle NFL speed, NFL complexity, NFL pressure? Or is he just getting the job because his dad is famous and the owner is desperate? Now let's talk about why Jimmy Haslam's desperation is even more dangerous than usual. In the NFL, you can't just buy your way out of bad decisions like you can in regular business. When you're running a trucking company or an investment firm, if you make a bad purchase, you write it off and move on. But in football, the salary cap is the salary cap. You've only got limited draft picks. When you invest big money in the wrong players, it cripples your entire operation. Look at what happened with Russell Wilson in Denver. They got rid of him, but that dead money absolutely destroyed their salary cap flexibility. You can't just throw cash at problems in the NFL, no matter how rich the owner is. Cleveland is already dealing with the Deshaun Watson contract disaster. They're paying premium money for a quarterback who's been more liability than asset. Now they're talking about potentially starting a rookie because they're desperate to find something, anything, that works at the position. This is exactly the kind of panic decision-making that keeps franchises stuck in mediocrity. Instead of building systematically, developing players properly, they're chasing the next shiny object hoping it'll magically fix everything. Here's something else that makes this whole situation even more complicated. Cleveland's environment is absolutely brutal for young quarterbacks. Shedeur Sanders doesn't have a huge arm to begin with. Now you're talking about throwing him into the AFC North, where it gets freezing cold, where the wind whips around those stadiums, where defenses are physical and nasty. Look at the quarterbacks who've thrived in divisions like the AFC North and NFC North. Tom Brady had that cannon arm. Eli Manning could zip it in the cold. Even guys like Jay Cutler and Caleb Williams have the arm strength to cut through those brutal conditions. But asking a finesse quarterback like Shedeur to succeed in Cleveland's environment? That's a massive ask. If he'd been drafted by a dome team, maybe you could see the vision. But in Cleveland, in December, when the playoffs are on the line and you need to make throws in freezing rain, that's a completely different challenge. This isn't about disrespecting Shedeur's talent. It's about putting players in positions to succeed instead of setting them up for failure because of organizational desperation. And we haven't even talked about the elephant in the room, Shedeur Sanders. You think primetime is just going to sit quietly while his son struggles in Cleveland? Shedeur already chiming in, and the season hasn't even started. Imagine what happens when the media pressure ramps up, when the criticism starts flying, when his son is getting hit behind a questionable offensive line. You think Coach Prime is going to stay out of it? This creates a media circus that Cleveland absolutely doesn't need. Every week becomes about Deion's latest comments, about family drama, about outside pressure. Instead of focusing on football development, everything becomes a soap opera. NFL teams need stability to develop young quarterbacks. They need patience, consistent coaching, and the ability to make mistakes without the world ending. But with the Deion factor involved, every interception becomes a national story. Every bad game becomes a referendum on the entire organization. So here's how this is going to play out. And you can bookmark this prediction. Joe Flacco starts week 1 because that's the safe, conservative choice. But by week 3, after Cleveland has been outscored by 40-plus points in their first few games, after Flacco has thrown multiple picks in prime time, after the fans are calling for someone, anyone, to provide a spark, that's when Jimmy Haslam makes his move. By September, nobody in Cleveland is going to want to watch Joe Flacco take another snap. The calls for Shedeur will be deafening. And Jimmy Haslam, being the impulsive owner that he is, will cave to the pressure. But here's what nobody's talking about. Is Shedeur Sanders actually ready for this? Because being thrust into a starting role because your owner is desperate is completely different from earning it through preparation and performance. The kid has talent, no doubt. But the NFL is a different beast. The speed is different. The complexity is different. The pressure is absolutely different. And when you're dealing with a franchise that's already dysfunctional, already dealing with Watson's contract mess, already struggling with roster construction, that's not exactly the ideal environment for a rookie quarterback to develop. This isn't about hating on Shedeur. This is about recognizing that Cleveland is setting up another potential disaster because they refuse to learn from their past mistakes. And when this inevitably blows up, because let's be honest, it probably will, what happens next? Stfansky walks away. Andrew Berry starts looking for other opportunities. The locker room becomes toxic because veterans see that performance doesn't matter, only owner preferences do. You know what that leads to? Another coaching search, another GM search, another rebuild that isn't really a rebuild because you're still stuck with bad contracts and limited draft capital. This is the cycle that keeps franchises like Cleveland stuck in mediocrity. Instead of building systematically, instead of developing players properly, instead of creating a sustainable culture, they keep chasing quick fixes and shiny objects. The Browns have one of the most talented rosters in the NFL on paper. They've got Myles Garrett, they've got weapons on offense, they've got pieces on defense. But none of that matters if your quarterback situation is a circus and your owner is making decisions based on desperation instead of football logic. This Shedeur Sanders situation is really about something much bigger than just one player or one season. It's about organizational culture. It's about whether Cleveland can finally break the cycle of dysfunction that's plagued them for decades. Jimmy Haslam has been the owner since 2012. In that time, they've had multiple head coaches, multiple GMs, multiple franchise quarterbacks. The one constant has been the owner's inability to stay out of football decisions. Now we're potentially looking at another situation where the owner's impatience and desperation overrules the football people's judgment. And history tells us exactly how that story ends. The tragic part is that Cleveland fans deserve better. They've been loyal through decades of heartbreak. They show up, they support the team, they believe every year that this might be different. But they keep getting let down by the same organizational problems that if the Browns want to actually succeed, Jimmy Haslam needs to step back and let the football people do their jobs. Kevin Stfansky and Andrew Berry have proven they know what they're doing. They took this team to the playoffs. They've built a competitive roster despite having to deal with the Watson situation, but they need time. They need patience. They need the ability to develop players properly without having to worry about ownership interference every time there's a bad game or a slow start. Shedeur Sanders might be a talented player. He might have a bright future in the NFL, but throwing him into Cleveland's current situation, with all the pressure and dysfunction and unrealistic expectations, isn't setting him up for success. The smart play would be to let him develop properly, learn the system, prove himself in practice, and earn the job when he's actually ready. But that requires patience, and patience isn't exactly Jimmy Haslam's strong suit. Here's my final prediction. Shedeur Sanders will be starting for the Cleveland Browns by Week 8. Not because he's ready, not because he's earned it, but because Jimmy Haslam will panic when the season starts poorly and he'll demand a change. It's going to create a media circus. It's going to divide the locker room. It's going to put enormous pressure on a young player who isn't ready for it. And ultimately, it's probably going to end badly for everyone involved. The Browns will waste another season. Shedeur's development will be stunted. Kevin Stfansky and Andrew Berry will be looking for exit strategies. And Cleveland fans will be left wondering why they keep going through the same cycle over and over again. But I want to know what you think. Am I being too harsh on Jimmy Haslam? Is Shedeur Sanders ready to handle this pressure? Can Cleveland actually break their cycle of dysfunction, or are they destined to repeat the same mistakes? Do you think Kevin Stfansky will really quit if he's forced to start a quarterback he doesn't believe in? Is this the beginning of another Browns disaster, or could this actually work out? And here's the big question. If you were Shedeur Sanders, would you even want to be in this situation? Being handed a starting job because of owner desperation instead of earning it through your play? Leave your thoughts in the comments. Tell me if you think I'm wrong. Tell me if you see something I'm missing. Because this story is just getting started, and it's going to be wild to watch it unfold. The Cleveland Browns are about to become the most interesting quarterback story in the NFL, and not for good reasons. Between Jimmy Haslam's desperation, Joe Flacco's limitations, and Shedeur Sanders' potential, we're looking at a situation that could define this franchise for years to come. Make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell because this story is going to have more twists and turns than a soap opera. We'll be covering every development, every controversy, every dramatic moment as it unfolds. And trust me, with the Browns involved, there's going to be plenty of drama to go around. This is just the beginning of what could be the most chaotic quarterback situation in recent NFL history. Don't miss out on any of it. Subscribe now, and let's watch this train wreck together.